For decades, Arnold Schwarzenegger talked about everything: his victories, his movies, his mistakes, even the darkest corners of his life. But there was one name he avoided, one story he tiptoed around every time the cameras were rolling: Mike Mentzer. Whenever Mentzer's name came up, Arnold's smile tightened, his answers shortened, and the conversation shifted. And people always wondered why. Because behind the iconic photos and the polite public comments was a rivalry built on brilliance, ego, and a single moment so explosive it split the bodybuilding world in half. A moment Arnold never fully addressed. A moment that pushed Mentzer away from the stage forever and left a shadow that followed both men until their final days. This wasn't just competition. It was regret. It was pride. It was a silent wound Arnold carried for years, long after the lights of the Olympia stage faded. And now, only recently, he's begun to speak, finally revealing what he truly thought of Mentzer, what really happened between them, and the truth he kept buried for almost half a century. What he says now changes everything. Long before their names were tied to one of the most heated controversies in bodybuilding history, Arnold Schwarzenegger actually admired Mike Mentzer on a level most fans never realized. In the mid-70s, before the drama, before the whispers, before the 1980 explosion, Mentzer was simply the young phenom everyone was watching, and Arnold was watching him closer than most. Mentzer wasn't just another competitor with big dreams. He had a presence, a stillness, a laser-focused intensity that separated him from the crowd before he even stepped on stage. When he trained, he didn't just lift weight, he attacked it with purpose. His sessions were short, brutal, and efficient, as if he was carving his physique with the precision of a surgeon. While others laughed between sets or wasted time arguing about diet philosophies, Mentzer treated the gym like sacred ground. Every rep was a calculation. Every set was a test. No wasted movement, no ego, no drift in focus. Arnold, who built his empire on charisma, instinct, and relentless volume, saw that and respected it deeply. He knew champion qualities when he saw them, and Mentzer had all the early signs: drive, discipline, self-belief, and a frightening level of control over his body and mind. Even when Arnold was the reigning king, he recognized that Mentzer's rise wasn't hype, it was real. The kid from Pennsylvania was coming, and coming fast. They weren't close friends, but in those early encounters backstage and in training halls, there was a genuine warmth. Arnold would walk over, offer a compliment about Mentzer's density or posing, and Mentzer, who was usually guarded, would crack a small smile and return the respect. They exchanged brief conversations about training philosophy, nutrition, even literature. Mentzer, famously intellectual, was one of the few bodybuilders who could discuss Ayn Rand or Nietzsche right after finishing a brutal set. Arnold found that fascinating. Mentzer found Arnold's bold, instinctive approach equally intriguing. For a moment, their relationship existed in this balanced space, two different minds figuring each other out, two different paths leading toward the same peak. Arnold admired Mentzer's logic, Mentzer admired Arnold's vision, and beneath it all was a competitive awareness. This guy might actually become the future. But Arnold also sensed something else, something he couldn't quite name at the time. Mentzer wasn't just disciplined, he was consumed, driven by a seriousness that never seemed to switch off. Arnold joked once in a friendly way that Mentzer was too serious, too intense. But behind the humor was an honest observation. Arnold loved the joy of bodybuilding, the energy, the crowd, the plays with psychology and instinct. Mentzer loved the order of it, the science, the philosophy, the structure. Arnold operated like an artist fueled by emotion. Mentzer moved like a philosopher bound by principle. Two brilliant minds, two opposing energies, and two very different ways of carrying the weight of ambition. At the time, it didn't seem like a problem. It was just a subtle difference, a harmless contrast in personality. But that difference, those tiny cracks in how they thought, trained, and competed, would eventually widen into a divide far bigger than either of them imagined. As the 70s rolled on, the quiet respect between Arnold and Mentzer began to transform into something more complicated. Not hatred, not conflict, but a clash of two completely different worlds. Mike Mentzer wasn't just another bodybuilder with a unique training routine. He was a theorist, a philosopher, a man who believed every rep, every breath, and every second in the gym needed a reason rooted in logic. His heavy-duty system was built on science, intensity, minimalism, and absolute precision. One all-out set to failure, done perfectly, was, according to Mentzer, more effective than 5 sloppy sets fueled by instinct and adrenaline. Arnold couldn't have been further from that mindset. Where Mentzer demanded structure, Arnold thrived inside chaos. His training was instinctive, wild even. He chased the pump, chased the feeling, chased the moment. If his body told him to do 20 sets, he did 20. If he wanted to train a muscle group twice in a day, he did it without a second thought. Arnold believed in pushing the limits not through science, but through intuition and energy. He would say, "You don't think about training, you feel it." Naturally, those two philosophies were destined to collide. Behind the scenes, Arnold would tease Mentzer, not cruelly, but with that sharp, confident humor he was famous for. He joked that Mentzer thought too much, that he treated training like a math problem instead of a battle. Mentzer in turn would look at Arnold's marathon workouts and call them madness, shaking his head at the countless sets, the endless volume, the reckless pushing past exhaustion. To Mentzer, Arnold was a charismatic genius with an outdated system. To Arnold, Mentzer was a brilliant guy making things way too complicated. But here's what made the tension intriguing. It wasn't hostile. Not yet. This wasn't the kind of rivalry built on insults or jealousy. It was the simple truth that two of the most influential minds in bodybuilding believed in two opposing truths, and only one of them could be crowned the face of the sport. Fans took sides. Other competitors whispered backstage, wondering whose method would dominate the next era. And slowly, what started as playful teasing and philosophical debate began to grow into something heavier. A quiet pressure lingered, an unspoken competition, a question hanging in the air every time they stepped into the same room. Which one of them was right? But that philosophical tug-of-war was nothing compared to what happened next, because everything shifted the moment Arnold walked into Sydney. Nothing in bodybuilding prepared the world for what happened in Sydney. The 1980 Mr. Olympia wasn't just another competition, it was the moment the sport cracked in half. And it all started with one shocking decision. Arnold Schwarzenegger's sudden comeback. Nobody expected to see him there. He was retired. He was filming movies. He wasn't training for the stage. Not publicly, at least. So when Arnold walked into the venue, tan, smiling, and quietly announcing that he was entering the contest that very day, the entire backstage froze. Fans were stunned. Competitors were furious. And Mike Mentzer, he was blindsided. Because Mentzer wasn't just prepared, he was in the best shape of his life. His physique was dense, sharp, perfectly carved. Many believed it was the greatest package he had ever brought to a stage. For the first time, he felt like the Olympia wasn't just a dream, it was his. He was the logical successor to the throne. And now, suddenly, Arnold, his philosophical opposite, his ideological rival, was stepping back into the ring to challenge him. What followed was chaos. The judging panel was a mess. Rumors of bias swirled before the show even started. Competitors argued backstage over scoring, posing orders, and the sudden shift in the lineup. Tempers flared. Words were exchanged. At one point, Mentzer and Arnold were said to have gotten into a heated argument, one fueled not by hatred but by the shock of a friend feeling betrayed, and a legend defending his right to compete. When the final results were announced and Arnold was crowned Mr. Olympia once again, the room erupted. Some cheered, many booed, and Mentzer felt something snap inside him. He believed the judging was political. He believed Arnold's win was predetermined. He believed the sport wasn't about fairness anymore. Arnold, for his part, insisted there was no conspiracy. He claimed he simply won because he deserved it, that he was judged like anyone else. To him, the anger was just noise, competitors refusing to accept defeat. But Mentzer didn't buy it, and he didn't forgive it. Whether the truth lies somewhere in the middle or far to one side, one thing is certain: the 1980 Olympia didn't just decide a champion. It destroyed a friendship, shattered a legacy, and sent Mentzer down a path he would never return from. The respect they once shared died that night. For years after the 1980 Olympia, Arnold barely spoke about Mike Mentzer. He'd mention his name politely, acknowledge his intelligence, nod respectfully when interviewers brought him up, but the deeper story, the real emotions, stayed locked away. It was as if Arnold had built a wall around that part of his past. Fans asked, journalists pushed, documentaries circled the topic, yet Arnold never fully opened the door until recently. When he finally did, his tone wasn't defensive or triumphant. It was reflective, almost heavy. Arnold admitted the 1980 Olympia was the most tense show I ever entered, a rare moment of honesty that broke the decades-long silence. He described the backstage energy as explosive, competitors on edge, and the atmosphere thick with suspicion. For the first time, he acknowledged that the tension wasn't just between athletes, it was between him and Mentzer specifically. But he didn't talk about Mentzer with bitterness. He spoke with respect. He said Mentzer was one of the smartest guys in the gym, a thinker, a man who brought philosophy into a sport built on instinct. Yet Arnold also revealed the one thing that always puzzled him. Mike thought too much. It wasn't an insult. It was an observation from someone who believed overthinking could destroy an athlete's confidence. To Arnold, Mentzer's greatest strength, his logic was also the very thing that trapped him. And then came the part Arnold never shared in his prime. He admitted he regretted how things ended between them. There was no closure, no conversation, no clearing of the air. The storm of 1980 swept them in opposite directions, and neither man made the move to repair the bond they once had. Arnold said they never truly reconciled, and the weight of that truth sat on his voice. He didn't hide it. He didn't try to rewrite history. He simply carried it, like an old bruise that still aches when pressed. There was an emotional shift in his tone, subtle but unmistakable. For once, Arnold wasn't the champion defending a victory. He was a man acknowledging that something meaningful had been lost, and that the rift between them wasn't just about a trophy. It was about two brilliant personalities colliding, misunderstanding each other, and letting pride and silence build a wall neither would climb over again. But the most surprising part wasn't the regret. It was what Arnold said next, because it revealed that he had seen a side of Mike Mentzer that almost nobody else truly understood. When Arnold finally broke his silence, he revealed something almost no one expected. He had been watching Mentzer more closely than people realized. Beneath the rivalry, beneath the philosophical clash, Arnold had noticed signs that Mike wasn't just pushing himself physically. He was wearing himself down in ways few athletes could survive. Arnold said that Mentzer's discipline wasn't normal discipline. It was sharper, heavier, almost punishing. While other bodybuilders laughed between sets or relaxed after contests, Mike carried a kind of mental weight with him. Pressure he placed on himself to be perfect. Pressure to prove his philosophy right. Pressure to live up to the ideals he built his entire identity around. To the outside world, Mentzer looked confident and unshakable. But Arnold saw the cracks. He remembered seeing Mentzer exhausted, drained, almost haunted after training sessions. Not physically tired, that was normal, but mentally overloaded, as if he carried the gym home with him every single day. Friends said Mentzer couldn't relax, couldn't switch off, couldn't stop analyzing everything. Arnold didn't criticize him for it. He understood that drive. But he worried that Mentzer was running himself into the ground with expectations no human could meet. Arnold even described Mentzer as brilliant but consumed by ideals, a phrase that revealed exactly how he saw him. Mentzer didn't just want to be great, he wanted his training philosophy, his logic, his system, his worldview to be perfect. When things didn't go according to that logic, it hit him harder than anyone realized. And Arnold, with his looser instinctive approach, sensed that Mike's inner battles were heavier than anyone wanted to admit. This is where Arnold's voice cracked a little, because for the first time he acknowledged something that sounded painfully close to guilt. He said, "I wish I talked to him more." It wasn't said lightly. It wasn't said as a media-friendly soundbite. It was the admission of a man who realized too late that someone he respected deeply had been struggling in ways that went far beyond bodybuilding. Arnold wasn't claiming he could have saved Mentzer or changed everything. He simply regretted not stepping closer when he saw Mike drifting into that heavy, lonely space. He regretted letting silence fill the gap where understanding should have been. And then came the part of the story Arnold has never shaken off, the part he still carries like a shadow. After the explosion of the 1980 Olympia, Mike Mentzer didn't just walk away from the stage, he disappeared from the entire world of bodybuilding. The sport he once dominated, the system he tried to reform, the philosophy he poured his soul into. He abandoned all of it, almost overnight. For fans, it felt sudden. But for those who paid attention, it was the final breaking point after years of pressure, expectation, and inner battles that had slowly worn him down. Mentzer retreated from competition, from the spotlight, and from the intensity of the bodybuilding scene. He focused on writing, coaching, and pursuing his intellectual passions, but even those close to him could feel a heaviness settling in. His energy shifted. The sharp, confident thinker became quieter, more withdrawn, as if the weight of everything he had fought for had finally become too much. He struggled with long periods of exhaustion and emotional strain, moments that hinted at how deeply the 1980 fallout had affected him. And though he managed to stay connected to the community through his heavy-duty teachings, something in him had dimmed. Arnold watched from a distance. He didn't speak publicly about the rift, didn't reach out, didn't try to rebuild the bridge that had collapsed between them. Maybe he thought there would be time later. Maybe he assumed they'd meet one day, laugh about the past, and put everything behind them with a handshake. But life didn't give them that moment. When news reached Arnold that Mike Mentzer had passed away, it hit him harder than he expected. He wasn't just hearing about the loss of a former rival. He was hearing about the loss of someone he genuinely respected, someone whose mind and influence had shaped the sport in ways few people understood. And at the same time, he felt something else: regret. Arnold said quietly, "We should have cleared things up." A simple sentence. But inside those words was an entire history. Two men who admired each other, misunderstood each other, and let silence fill the space where closure should have been. Arnold didn't hide the sadness in his voice. He didn't pretend the past didn't matter. For once, he let the world see that he wasn't just the champion who won in 1980. He was a friend who lost the chance to make peace. But Mentzer's story didn't end with that tragedy. And neither did the story he and Arnold wrote together. Because despite the rift, despite the controversy, despite the years of silence, the legacy they created together didn't end in darkness. In the years after Mentzer's passing, something unexpected happened. Arnold began to speak about him with a clarity and appreciation that he had never shown during their competitive years. Instead of dodging Mentzer's name or keeping the past buried, he started crediting Mike for something powerful, reshaping the way modern athletes think about training. Arnold openly acknowledged that Mentzer's heavy-duty system, once seen as radical or even extreme, had influenced an entire generation of bodybuilders, strength coaches, and fitness thinkers. Shorter, more intense sessions, greater focus on recovery, strategic failure sets. These ideas, which Mentzer had pushed long before they were considered mainstream, eventually started showing up everywhere, from top-tier bodybuilding programs to everyday gym routines. Arnold didn't pretend that his own high-volume approach matched it. Instead, he admitted that Mentzer's ideas were ahead of their time, and as Arnold's praise grew, so did something else, a revival of heavy-duty. Old videos resurfaced. Mentzer's books began circulating again. Young lifters who weren't even born in 1980 started adopting his philosophy, creating a new wave of followers who saw Mentzer not as the man defeated in Sydney, but as a visionary who refused to compromise. The internet amplified his legacy even further. Every year, new debates erupted online, with fans reanalyzing photos, comparing physiques, and arguing passionately about whether Mentzer should have won the 1980 Olympia. Suddenly, history wasn't static. It was being rewritten, reinterpreted, and refought by people who believed Mentzer had been wronged, and by others who defended Arnold's victory just as fiercely. And in the middle of all this, Arnold continued to speak respectfully about Mike's brilliance. He urged people not to reduce him to the controversy, but to recognize the depth of his mind, the courage behind his ideas, and the impact he left behind. It was almost as if Arnold was trying to give Mentzer the recognition he didn't receive in life. A redemption not of the contest, but of the man. But Arnold also left the world with something haunting. Not an answer, but a question that cuts to the core of their relationship and the unresolved tension that forever links their names. If things had gone differently, if 1980 hadn't ended the way it did, if pride hadn't built a wall between them, if they had talked one last time, would the sport and their lives have taken a different path? It's a question Arnold never answers directly. Maybe he can't. Maybe no one can. In the end, the story of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Mike Mentzer isn't just about two men with extraordinary physiques. It's about respect that turned into rivalry, rivalry that turned into silence, and silence that turned into lifelong regret. They began as two brilliant minds drawn to each other's strengths, divided by their differences, and ultimately torn apart by a moment that neither one ever truly escaped. Mentzer brought logic, intensity, and intellect to a sport built on instinct and charisma. Arnold brought intuition, presence, and an unshakable belief in his own path. Their clash wasn't just personal, it was philosophical. And when that clash reached its peak in Sydney, it didn't just crown a champion, it fractured a friendship, redirected two lives, and left questions that echo louder as the years go by. Even now, decades later, fans still debate the truth. Did Arnold defend a system that was fair, or did he bury a truth that would have changed everything? Was Mentzer robbed by politics or crushed by the impossible standards he demanded from himself? There are no simple answers, and maybe that's why this rivalry endures, because it forces us to confront the complicated human side of greatness. What do you think? Was the 1980 Olympia a fair fight, or the moment that stole Mentzer's shot at history? And did Arnold finally bring justice to his legacy, or simply reopen a wound that never healed? Let me know in the comments.